So this is another tool review video. This is for another laser cutter, but this one is the Ortur Laser Master 3, which is the upgraded version of the Ortur Laser Master 2. I did not own the Laser Master 2, so I can't really give a ton of compare and contrast for them. But a lot of the videos I've been watching on YouTube have the number 2 in there, and you can see they've just really streamlined the design and made a bunch of improvements to how it functions. So this video is obviously going to be a tool review, but if you watch last week's video, which was also a tool review, this one's going to cover a little more of introductory basics, at least at first. I kind of posted them. This should have been the first post, but this company was a little more lenient with their timeline, so I was able to. I had to upload the other laser last week in order to fulfill some time restraints. So this is the first laser I've actually started testing with, which is why the projects in the beginning will be much more simplistic than the video I posted last week. So that's kind of just a basic introduction to that. I wanted to gear this video like the other one to not only be informative about the laser, but informative about what to expect when buying one of these lasers and the knowledge needed in order to get them up and running. Like I said in the last video, these are as simple as importing an image. It doesn't even necessarily have to be an SVG file into a program and having the laser cutter cut it, to as complicated as drawing your own vector images and having them cut very complicated things. So obviously I've only had these for a little bit of time, so I'm not at the complicated stage yet, but these were obviously given to me in order to make the videos. They're not cheap machines, even the cheap ones, so I do want to give people a really good overview of what is to be expected before you go out and spend a ton of money on them. The links to this are affiliate links. That was one of the stipulations of reviewing the product. I've mentioned how I feel about affiliate links on this channel before, but to be perfectly honest, I've been trying to get my hands on one of these lasers for quite a while, and a lot of the other companies I was talking to, they fell through for one reason or another. So just keep in mind that they are affiliate links. I do not want anyone in any way, shape, or form going out and buying one of these thinking it would help the channel. Not that I think anyone would, but I wanted to let you know that those are affiliate links. So a couple things to also consider in case I forget to mention it in the video. I do have air assist on this. The nice thing about this one is there's just a hole up here on top that you can plug the air assist right into, and that blows the smoke away from the project, as it's useful when cutting. But I also have this rather large exhaust vent which is hooked up to a duct that runs to my window. I actually was going to do a compare and contrast of the smoke produced by this machine, but honestly after running it for a little bit, the whole shop filled up fairly quickly, so I do not recommend using these without some sort of exhausting system. Eventually, and I've seen a lot of people build this to make an enclosure for it to make the exhausting system even more effective. That's something I might do down the line, but there's a reason why the much more expensive CO2 machines, which are different than these because they're diodes, but they do similar things, are they have the enclosure so that you don't really have to worry about it, but that is something to consider. So the beginning of this video, like I said, is going to be very technical. It's a lot of technical information about just getting up and running with the program. And then later in the video, I will have a couple small projects I make. The big build for this is not going to be posted until next week. The reason for that is I have found, especially with my last laser review, as these videos get longer, people do not want to watch them. It's just too much of a time commitment, I guess. So if I keep them shorter, I do get more people coming through and watching the videos. So I decided to break this one up into 2 parts. So the build video for this will be the following week, and then after that, I think I'm finally at a point where I'm ready to start uploading regular content after that. So there should be regular uploads every week going forward. So like I said in the intro, the beginning part of this video is going to be a lot of technical information. So you could fast forward past that to where I start using the laser cutter if you like, but I put it in here because I thought it'd be useful information for someone who's thinking of buying one of these, exactly what it entails, and a very, very rough outline of what you need to know when engraving and cutting out these images. So basically the program I'm using is Lightburn. It's a paid program. I don't know if it's a yearly subscription, but my free trial ran out and they charged me $60, which is $60, but honestly other software I own for running this business is much more expensive, so I thought that was fairly reasonable. But there are free programs to use, obviously with not nearly as many capabilities, but if you don't want to spend the money on this, there are options. The first thing I did for any of this was I imported my logo. I kind of stuck with that throughout all of these laser videos because it kind of gives you a nice compare and contrast when you're using the same image. So this is obviously a JPEG, which means it's a raster image. Basically, in layman's terms, if I zoom in on this, you could see that this image is all made up of pixels. So the laser does not cut these as well as it does SVG files, which are vector files, which are composed of paths. So this corgi I have, which I cut a little bit later, you could see when I zoom in, all the lines are smooth. There's no curves. Even on this other corgi, which is a PNG, which I engraved as well, zooming in, it's much smoother than this JPEG, which starts to get pixelated right about here. Now, I did have success engraving this, mainly I think because it is such a simple image. But if you go to try and engrave this JPEG up here, which is a picture from the Goonies I just happen to have on my computer, you're going to have to do some tweaking. It won't just engrave right from importing it into the program. But for both of these lasers, I imported this file. Obviously, it has some background information which I could have deleted in Photoshop, and it came out with a very nice engraving right off the bat. No changes to it. That's basically what that looks like. So that's engraving. Like I said, if you want to engrave a photo like this, I'm still getting used to the controls. A photo like this, you have to do some tweaking. It's a little bit outside the realm of this video just because I don't want it to be super long, so I'll put a link in the description to how I learned how to do that. But basically that is going to be a matter of, you could do some adjustments outside the program, but you click on adjust image and you play around with all of these settings in order to get what you want. The most important setting is going to be figuring out your resolution. If you put your resolution too high, it will actually blur the image. Too low, it will blur the image. So for example, when I went to go engrave photos, this is an example of all of my tests. And it took a while to get this one, which is actually a fairly good engraving for a laser engraver on wood. That will be in the video. And I learned all that through another rather long video. So that is basically going to be engraving pictures. So then another thing people are going to want to do is cut things out. So on this image, I could double click it and then I could trace it. So the tracing will create an outline essentially of your image. Click OK, and then there is my outline. From there, I could double click again, and this bigger O over here will create an offset. You could play around with all of these settings. I'm just going to click OK for the purposes of this video, and it creates this offset around the whole side. So my cut layers is going to be a little confusing because I have all these images open. But basically what I did for this then was I clicked on my outer layer and I changed it to a different color, and I set that as line over here. So that will cut now instead of fill. And then just simply by doing that, I was able to make this. Now the engraving on this isn't as crisp as the original, and that's because this one over here took quite a bit of time to cut. So just for simplicity's sake, I lowered the detail on this one because I was mainly testing the cutout. And this is 1/4 inch ply, and that worked really well. So if you want to simply cut out a logo, it's pretty easy to do. So then for when I did the corgi, which you will also see in the video, I did end up engraving this image right here to get the detail, and that turned out like that. But this file also came with this SVG, which is the one with the smooth lines, and you could see if I delete this and delete this, this is the information for the corgi. You could see that they have the files set up to a couple different lines. It will cut at a couple different speeds and create that image as well. It's a little hard to see, but when you zoom in, you could see they have a very faded line creating the entire image right there. So that's basically the gist of importing images and cutting stuff out. So a couple other things, I mentioned this in the other video. I bought this laser test file kit essentially off Etsy. It was only $4, and instead of doing this all myself, he has it laid out so that you could see all the test files. You could import them right into the program and test on all of your materials. Every time you change a material, it's going to have to be tested to see how well it cuts, how well it engraves, and the speeds and the settings for all of that. This takes the guesswork out of all of it. So you can see he has an engrave test as well, and then a grayscale test if you want to start dealing with going through multiple layers of color to reveal other colors. Like I said, you could buy files if you don't want to get involved with making them yourself. Etsy is full of files. That's where I bought the corgi. It comes with the SVG file. Make sure there's that. But like I said, the one I ended up engraving was actually a PNG. You can get away with engraving JPEGs and PNGs if they're low detail images. If you do have an image, and I've done this with my vinyl color, this website, Convertio, will convert JPEGs to SVGs. You can only upload, it says right here, 100 megabytes, and then I think it only stores a certain amount for you, and then after that you have to buy the program. But I've been able to use it for free on a couple files. It doesn't always work, and there's other ones out there that are free that I don't find work at all, but if this is an option. I did this on another project where I had a JPEG and I needed to convert it to an SVG, and that worked really well. Like I said before, this is Inkscape. This is going to be what I'm going to start playing around with to try and draw some of my own stuff, because buying images off of Etsy forever is not really going to work for me. For now it is. But like you can see, especially with low detail images like my logo, I was able to come into this program, build the laser, come into the program, and have these initial cuttings, my logo, this cutout, and all of that in an afternoon. So it is doable. But you can also see, like, even this making this corgi with the multiple lines and as a vector image is outside of my realm of capabilities right now, but that's kind of something I want to change. You could get pretty advanced with how far you take this, but you can also do simplistic things without needing to know a bunch about computers. It can be a rotary cutter. So basically there's a little icon up here, and you have to enable the rotary. There's luckily on the Ortur, it's just a switch that you flip, hook up the rotary tool and flip a switch. The main thing you're going to be messing with in here is going to be your millimeters per rotation. If you don't get that right, you could see it kind of had a big image, and then you can see how it stretched out here, and then finally I got it right by messing around with this number, because you also need to know your roller diameter, which I use calipers to get this, but once you have that set, that will be set forever unless you get a new rotary tool. And then you need the object diameter, which is a very simple measurement, and that automatically calculates the circumference for you. and then it's just a matter of plugging those numbers in and doing a couple test cuts. That is the process in and of itself. I'll be going over rotary cutting in the video, but once again, I'll be putting links to much longer videos. It can be a little daunting that you have to watch all these videos in order to learn the program, but there is just so many capabilities of it. I did find just sitting down and spending an afternoon with YouTube was much more useful than trying to mess around with it myself, because you have people that have gone through the process of trial and error, so that you can kind of avoid making all of these mistakes before getting the one that you want. So I'm not going to do a big unboxing and putting this together. The internet's already full of videos showing that. Essentially, they sent me a bunch of stuff to accompany this laser. The packaging was really nice. All the tools even came in a little box. All the instructions are online, just like the other laser, which I don't love. It saves paper. But when you're using your phone and your computer to try and run a program and read instructions, it is a little bit of a pain. They also gave me a honeycomb bed, which is, you need something underneath of this, especially when you're cutting. So that just elevates the piece, gets air around everything, and makes it a little more efficient at cutting. You can DIY those, you don't have to necessarily buy one. They also gave me that big venting fan, which you saw, this air assist, which gives a nicer cutting effect because it helps remove the smoke, as well as a rotary tool. So I'll be using all of this stuff in the video. All this stuff comes with clamps and whatnot to hold it down, but I won't be setting that up yet until I permanently decide where I'm going to be putting all of this stuff. So like I said, this is initially starting the piece. Unlike the other laser, this one actually has a homing setting, which was nice, but I basically just imported my logo and started engraving. As you can see, the settings I originally had were not dark enough, but it did engrave the image. So this was really where I started learning and processing information, because I knew it wasn't going to be as easy as just importing any sort of file and making whatever I wanted. So in the program, they do have a material test that you can use. That is what I used at first. I did upgrade to that Etsy program I showed you, because it does test a couple other things. But these initial settings were really useful to get me up and running. You can perform the test on the tool. You could see it shows you what power and what speed to set, and then that will help with the initial settings. I tried it on birch and pine as well, just to kind of get an idea of how this would work. Obviously the pine, because it's the softest of the three woods, you can see there's a little bit more of the grid showing up, but in general they were all quite similar. So like I said in the last laser video, a lot of this is just going to be fine-tuning your settings. Those are going to be specific to the program you're using, what you're cutting on, as well as your laser. So I'm not going to input a ton of information here about my settings, because they might not necessarily work for you. But with those tests, or the tests I have on Etsy, you can set your initial settings. So you'll see the difference between running that test and then engraving that logo is huge. Obviously this is oak I'm engraving on, so the grain has a lot of texture, so that shows up in the pattern. But in general, I was really surprised by how well this worked and how much detail it did actually render. So then, like I said in the intro, the next thing I wanted to do was test on cutting, because I am planning on cutting a lot of stuff on these machines. So that was just a matter of tracing the image and then making an outline for it. The traced image will be a fill layer, so it will still be engraved. And then on the outside, this offset I'm creating, you could see how you could play around with the offset to get the look you're after. And then I could change that offset to a different color, and it will cut that offset as a cut line if I set it to line. So once again, really simple, easy settings. You can see one's line. I'm going to change the interior stuff to fill, so that will be engraved.
and then I removed some of the detail in the program in this so it cuts a little bit faster. These machines are really cool, but even small engravings can take, you know, upwards of a half an hour to do. So I did remove some of the detail, using the framing button, which I'm getting used to frame out where this is going to cut. And then I could go through and do that. Obviously, you always want to engrave before you cut. So there's the engraving, and then the cut layer will go on the outside. So these were the first two things I did in the laser. It's funny because the laser mark is actually so small. I really didn't think that this plywood had cut through at all. But if you push on it, obviously on the bed, to make sure it went through before moving it, and that's what it looks like. So for the rotary tool, I have to raise this. I do believe they make razors, but it's just easy enough to use paint cans for myself. This one's really nice. It has the accessible plug in the back with the switch to flip. And then basically, like I said, I opened this window box, imported all my numbers based on what I was using, and went from there. Now the rotary tool setting I did have a problem with at first because I watched a video that was recommended where he went through and changed a bunch of settings. I'm going to put that one in there because it's kind of the video that everyone recommends, but I'm also going to put one in there with a woman who just kind of went through and did it much quicker, and that worked for me as well. When I went through and changed a bunch of settings, I had a problem with getting the machine to rehome, and I had lots of issues with errors. So in order to do this, all I did is what I showed you. I plugged it in, I changed all of my numbers, and I was able to engrave. Now obviously this was the number I didn't have accurate, was the millimeters per rotation, which was why this was coming out distorted at first. But after I figured that out, you could see I kind of did a bunch of tests to narrow in on that number. And then once I finally got that, which will change based on what you're doing, I got a pretty solid engraving on here, as you can see. Was a little bit of a learning curve with the rotary tool at first, but the second and the third time I used it, it was much easier to set up. And it's pretty cool, the clarity of these images. So since I had it set up, and I apologize, I did not realize obviously at the time that this was upside down, I wanted to try doing the same thing on wood, because there is a little bit of a template you have to import into the program. I'm not going to get into all of that. You could watch that other video if you wanted to get more in depth on rotary engraving, but all I did was change the diameter and circumference numbers, and I was able to replicate the exact same thing on a dowel. Did a smaller one, but grain's going to be your big issue on wooden pieces, so that's why I moved it. So then, like I said, I bought this corgi because I wanted to make a QR code for the Wi-Fi. So this was a quick, easy project that I had already wanted to do, and you could import images. You could type in the program like I'm showing right here, and very quickly make a template to cut out. And then the QR code is generated on my phone. So then this is in real time, just giving you an idea of how slow the machine has to move to generate these images. That's the QR code. Obviously I'm covering that up because I don't want everyone to know the password, but it does work, which was pretty neat. So this was a test piece I did on oak. I changed a couple of things, and then printed it on poplar, which I'm having really good success with poplar because the grain is so much more fine than other lumbers. But you could see that's the minor changes I made. The engraving this took about 45 minutes just for one of these, so it does take a little bit of time. Then, like I said, you can do images. I'm going to put some links to how I learned how to input images, because with more detailed images like this, if you just input them into the program, the first time I did it, it turned out pretty much all black. So there's a lot of tweaking to be had. Printing these on organic materials, you're always going to get a little bit of a blurry, pixelated look. It's just the nature of the material. But if you hone in on the settings, which, like I said, I learned in that video, I was pleasantly surprised with the detail you're able to get with importing a JPEG image into this. and that's basically what that looks like as well. So then I wanted to try aluminum as well, but I was doing some reading about it, and you don't want any sort of super reflective material because the beam can reflect back into the laser and damage it. So I had some aluminum flashing laying around, and there was a guy who simply used a matchstick to create ash on the aluminum. I know they make a special chemical you could paint on there, but it is a little bit expensive. So I just did that soot basically on the flashing, and then once again with the logo. The engraving for this, I don't have the aluminum settings figured out yet, so it is a little bit of a fainter engraving once you remove that soot, but it's still pretty cool seeing all the stuff that you can do. I know people have done plastics and leather and stuff like that as well. So I know that was a lot of information, and I'm going to kind of end this abruptly here, but I did want to put some footage of the project I built with last week's video just to give you an idea of what these are capable of. So then next week, because I didn't want this video to be 45 minutes long, I will be uploading another lampshade build because I have 2 lamps, but I'm going to be doing 2 completely different shades. But you can see that the possibilities are pretty much endless with these machines. I know these 2 reviews are more informative than anything else, but like I said, I really want people to get an idea of not only what they're capable of, but what is going to be entailed with being able to use the program and the machine.